Well, good morning, Warzone kids. This is Ben Johnson, and welcome to the channel, Trail to the Western Lands. I said Warzone kids. That's my term for those of us like myself. I'm a child sex abuse survivor, and as an adult, I live with borderline personality disorder. I'm a recovering addict and bulimic. Check most of the boxes for narcissistic personality disorder and a bunch of the other ones. And Warzone kid is what I call those of us out of childhood where it was more like a war zone and less like a supportive nursery where you can grow a hothouse orchid. And I think of our psyche, our soul, like who we are, as like a Jenga tower, kind of that game that you play with these wooden blocks. In every turn, you slide a little block out and you put it on top. Just how I think of it is our childhood, maybe, up to adolescence. It's a time when our Jenga towers as a human being are coming together. And every little bit of abuse, chronic harm, neglect, whether that's sexual abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, such as I had, physical abuse, which is not a giant part of my story, could be gender abuse, societal abuse, racial abuse, an actual war zone, an actual war, no metaphor required. Whatever it is, if you grow up in a war zone, all those pieces taken out of that Jenga tower and put on top, just like the game, they make that Jenga tower tall and unstable and shaky and full of coping mechanisms like binging and purging and cutting and prostituting yourself and trying really hard to make partner and make $2 billion because one's not enough. And maybe you need a JD and a PhD and an MD running away from your pain. And that Jenga tower falls down if you're a war zone kid at some point, or you have to spend your whole life trying to keep it up. And that's no way to live. You can't learn and become who you are when every last minute of every day of your life is spent trying to keep that Jenga tower from falling down. So I'm 51 years old, and my life now is about living life now, my life. And this channel is a big part of that. And I'm talking today with the patient Christine, who's just listened to my introduction. And you've all heard me on the channel talk about hidden water. I'm a green circle keeper at Hidden Water Circle, which is organization that facilitates healing circles by and for those affected by child sex abuse. There are multiple color circles for folks who have different relationships with that. And Christine and I have come together by way of Hidden Water. And I've actually not spoken with Christine until today. And so I'm very delighted to meet you. And at long last, we'll hand you the microphone, Christine. Why don't you tell the folk who you are and how we came to be here today?
Thank you. So nice to talk with you, Ben. Uh, I'm also a circle keeper, and I keep green circles for those who've harmed, and purple circles for those who have been harmed, and green purple circles because many of us have been harmed, caused harm.
I think you may have said that backwards. I believe that green circles are for those are for child sex abuse survivors, and purple circles are for those who've caused harm to children and are
Right.
ready to take responsibility. All right.
Yes,
Yeah, the colors went backwards and that
I did say that backwards. Sorry. Um, and shall I define them?
go for it.
Is it possible to define them, or
Yeah, please do.
is it
Yeah, you can
uh,
tell go over what all the circles are if you like.
cool? So, yeah, a work with Hidden Water. That's how we met, Ben. And so green, I'm a green circle keeper for those survivors of childhood sexual harm. I'm also a purple circle keeper for those who've caused harm and are wanting to take responsibility for that, willing to take responsibility, and green purple because many of us have both stories. There are orange circles for non-offending parents of those who've been harmed and who've caused harm. And there are blue circles for loved ones of both. And so I will say that I came to Hidden Water because I started work using restorative practices as an educator and as a school administrator in high school here in Canada. I'm in the Yukon Territory, the far northwest. of Canada, also traditional territory of the Kwanlin and the Ta'an Council. And so I learned from my Indigenous elders and some settler teachers how to use that in school. And in my retirement 10 years ago, I started really digging into the use of these practices with what we call complex and sensitive cases, and sexual harm being one. So that brought me to Hidden Water because I knew I had to work with my own stories before I could work with other people's stories. So that's me as far as a keeper. And after retiring, I founded Yukon Circle of Change, which is a nonprofit to bring restorative practices out into the community as much as possible by training folks who are interested in it and also facilitating restorative processes when harm has happened.
Excellent.
So,
Well, thank you so much. Um, the Tell me, I'm curious what it was like for you in the first circle that you went to, whether it was a hidden water circle or some other type of circle. I'm very curious, like what was your first experience like?
yeah, it would have been in circle with elders at school. It would have been a grieving circle for having lost a student. And wow, what I really remember was being a little nervous about the other people in the circle and how they would be able to handle being in this maybe heavy kind of conversation about losing this person. It was a suicide. And ooh, are we gonna be able to talk about this? And what I really remember was that really kind of grounded feeling like humph, just because one person's gonna speak at a time. We're not going to interrupt each other. We don't have to argue or relate or is what that person said okay or right or wrong, right? We just have to bear witness to each other and share to be understood. And yeah, I was just surprised at how much the circle could hold, I think.
Yeah, yeah. What Continue on. What was it like after that? You did other circles for other things? What was that
Yeah.
like as it went on?
So then, so then
Or
what happened?
maybe I'm sorry, let me interrupt myself.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Do you, and maybe it's too long ago to remember, but what was it like for you then at the end of that first circle that you did? And how long was that process like? Do you remember noticing anything in yourself in that first circle?
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
optimism. Like afterwards, it was like, wow, this is a really different way of relating to each other and being able to talk about difficult things. Uh, because I believe, like in Hidden Water, we talk about very heavy um, subjects and experiences, but that how Circle because Circle flattens, for me, I believe it flattens the hierarchy a lot more than the way we relate to each other in meetings or conversations or because often in like meetings or classes, there's the person up at the front, and then everybody else is lined up with our backs to each other. And if we're trying to discuss something, there's certain people who take up so much more space than other people. And so, whether we're talking about something as heavy as childhood sexual abuse or something as trivial as why aren't the dishes in the staff room getting done? That that this is just such a beautiful way to relate to each other and to talk about those things. And um, one of the things that I'm so grateful for is that circle has been around forever. And even though attribute like my first circle teachers were Indigenous, um, and sometimes I wonder about teaching circle, using circle, etc. And what my elder Mark Wedge from Carcross, who was a teacher of Kay Pronis as well, which is really interesting, like this connection. Kay and I didn't meet or start talking until Hidden Water, but you know, he says for many, many years, way, way, way back before there were cities, before there were villages, all of our ancestors circled up, probably around a fire, to problem solve, to celebrate, to grieve, to just relate and talk to each other. And that for many of us, uh, it was trained out of us culturally. We lost that practice. And luckily, many indigenous cultures around the world remember that practice and kept that practice. And I also think it's very generous that, for example, my Yukon Indigenous elders share that practice willingly and say this is an important practice for us to continue because, my culture is the one that really tried to train it out of them. Um, Literally almost beat it out of them, if you will, and how generous it is for them to have remembered and to come back and say, yes, but this is a good way to be together. So I felt hopeful after that first circle about living in a restorative way, seeing the world through a restorative lens, how that is so important for the human species, even just to survive together and to be together in a
Yeah.
peaceful way.
Thank you for that. It really something that came into my mind while you were talking about the the indigenous folks. You know, I'm a from working class Oklahoma, you know, and my folks, my people, my family came like migrated down out of Alabama and Tennessee after the Civil War over to Texas, up into Oklahoma. You know, they're yeoman farmers and Confederate soldiers and fled the desolate war zone. And you and I live in the same broader world where in many ways people are at each other's throats. So I like to, as a guy demographically, what I am, um, I like to I got passionate commitment like humanism and that we're all, we're all the same in the humanistic way. So I like to bring things that are specifically from my culture. I was really thinking about the Round Table, Knights of the Round Table, and King Arthur, legend to go way, way back. And what you said, the first thing out of your mouth flattens a hierarchy. There's a very strong, so I'm just going to inject some Anglo-Saxon like kind of way to relate here because they said that the origin of that round story is these people were all that's the same. All right, we got a king, but you just sit in that chair. It's a circle. We're all the same here. When we go and we're a circle keeper, I mean, I start the Zoom meeting, I click the button, I do a spreadsheet afterwards, but I'm in the circle. That came up to me a lot. I don't know if Comanche, maybe you know this. I don't know if Comanche actually practiced circles, but growing up in Oklahoma, it's Comanche, I think, are one of the larger, truly indigenous groups of people in Oklahoma, not brought there via the Trail of Tears. Mm, And they had a really ferocious reputation amongst other Plains Indians. And I really feel the connection with circles as those circles that those men would do with each other when they had literal wounds, psychic wounds. So that's kind of like my way of connecting from my angle,
Yeah.
with all of this. Um,
Yeah.
l Let me pitch you one about restorative, the word restorative.
Yeah.
And that was a real stumbling block for me. I've said this numerous times in videos. I mean, I come from a military adjacent family, basically brought up as like a Ronald Reagan American. And when I first heard about Hidden Water, uh, that's kind of like where I come from. When I first heard about Hidden Water, I thought restorative justice. Oh, this sounds like I'm going to do it because I was really suffering. I'll do it. I'll do anything. This sounds like I'm going to have to plug up both my ears because I'm going to get propagandized about someone's like political program because that's what restorative justice sounded like to me. And by
Mhm.
the time I got done with that circle, it was just totally different.
Mm.
Completely different. I mean, I don't know that anyone else would agree with this about restorative justice, but what I thought is, you know, like an eye for an eye. Restorative justice is about me getting my eye back. How do we get I want my vision back. Plucking your eye out and throwing it on the floor may or may not be the right thing to do, but it doesn't do anything about my eye. And I, as a child sex abuse survivor, care real deeply about us, about my green circlers and our experience and trying to live. So that rocked my world, restorative justice. I said, fine. Restorative justice is about me living my life, now and bringing back to me what I lost. And that really changed my outlook on the whole thing. That's kind of my wind up, and I'll just hand you the microphone. That's my wind up on restorative justice.
Yeah. Well, restorative, what it means for me. So I'll start by saying that I didn't like the way harm was dealt with in the school I was working with. Uh, when somebody went against the agreements of our community, broke a rule, right? Or in our broader community, we break a law, or in a family, we break an agreement we have. In my school, it was like you do this, you get 1 day suspension. You do this again, you get 2 days, or you do that, it's bigger, you get five, you get 10. So it was about exclusion from the community. And so it was, in a way, it was punishment at a time where the students maybe needed this community, maybe needed these adults in their lives, or this learning in their lives more than ever. And we expected them to learn to do better away from us when they came back to us, correct? And so for me, the restorative lens is, okay, instead of saying, what rule did you break? Who broke it? And what's your punishment? And that's going to make you do better. I mean, for me, that really comes from a very, what's the word? Like the people who colonized our continent here. They came over on the Mayflower. They came, with very punitive, there's another word I'm looking for. Maybe you can help me with it. Not prudent, but uh yeah, it came anyway from a very prudent society there. And that's the way we dealt with things here, right? So if we're trying to figure out what rule you broke, or how badly you broke it, there's not a lot of room for accountability there. There's a lot of room for like armoring up, lawyering up, and figuring out, how can I get away with the least punishment? How can I be accused of the lesser charge? Whereas from a restorative view, we say, what was the harm and who was harmed? What do they need to repair the harm and restore relationships, sometimes we're restoring, vandalism. Sometimes we're restoring something that was stolen and we're giving it back or paying back, but mostly we're restoring relationship. Okay, so um, what was the harm? Who was harmed? What is needed to repair that harm? Who's responsible for repairing it? And a lot of times we do that in circle, uh, so that also we have supporting people on both sides, and we have community members who might see underlying issues under what happened as well to help restore that. But all to say that accountability then becomes, justice becomes accountability and repair. And not only the person who did the harm is honored and supported, but the person who was harmed is also honored. And we're asking them, like before I started working restoratively at school, I wasn't asking the person harmed uh, how this other person should be dealt with and what they needed to feel better. In fact, by suspending them, I was doing more harm to both sides. So, number one, restorative justice means that accountability is prime. We're not letting anybody get away with, in fact, a lot of the students were like, no, don't, I don't want to sit in circle with them and their parents and the elder. And, it's tough on crime, And then for me, restorative, the big key was taking the questions that we used in those processes and taking the way that we look at the world restoratively, which is to hear about and express the impact of what's happening instead of focusing on the rule that was broken. Or it's not like you always leave your wet towel on the bed. You never do the dishes. Your dog is always barking and disrupting me. It's like, I feel sad when I hear your dog barking all day while you're away at work, and I need peace in my life. Would you be willing to talk to me about how we can look at this situation kind of thing? Yeah. So all to say that, restorative practices are the way we relate and speak to each other one-on-one. They are how we use restorative questions when things are kind of going sideways, or to get curious, more curious and less judgmental when something's happening. How we can have not only restorative conversations, but we can circle up when things are really going sideways. And we can look at if there has been harm, small or big, how that can be repaired.
I, what I love the most about what you said is that it takes us right back to an immediate question about the reality of the here and now. Like, what is it that we're doing? When some things happen, when there's been a whatever, an I don't want to infraction, or something's occurred, some harm has been wreaked somehow.
Yeah.
When we like when we respond to that, like what are we doing? What is the goal? What are we trying to get out of this? Are we trying to get the community? Do we have a community? Do we care about that? And what are we trying to do? And what are we trying to do, like on two levels with the community? Like, we want this to be whole again. We don't Getting a jailbird back in 3 years may or may not make life better. Mm. And then for the individual, what do we do? You're shamed, you're bad, you got the mark of Cain. Congratulations. Check out the next 40 years when you have to check that felony box on your thing and you got nothing. What are we doing? You know, in our own individual life, what are we doing? You know, what are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah. And can I just talk about the word restorative again? Like when we think about hidden water circles, which often happens in a family system or a community, or so we're restoring not only like looking to repair the harm that was done, possibly restoring our relationship with ourselves. When we look at what our healing edge is and how we may be able to work our path so that we are less defined by what happened to us or by what we did. So we're restoring not only our relationship with others around us, if possible, we're restoring our relationship with ourselves and how we view ourselves after having done that harm or after having been harmed, and how that's impacting our life day to day now. Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me more about how that's as your life has gone on since that first circle that you did. Tell me more. I'm very curious, like, how's your understanding of yourself and your fellow human creatures evolved over time? And I mean, I say nothing's done more from my experience of myself and humanity than the circles I've been part of. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to care. I wouldn't know how to get it any other way.
Right. So, one thing it's done is, as an educator and an administrator, and now as a community and world citizen, it takes me from that idea of like, you did this, so I'm looking at the rule book and this is what should happen, um, as far as like what should happen as a result of you having done that. It takes me, it takes me more to a place of, let's get curious as opposed to judgmental about this person who may be annoying me, harming me, whatever, or just in general in my community, in my school, in my family. Let's get more curious than judgmental, like what's under what they're doing. Um, you know, in the restorative questions that we use in a restorative process, the restorative questions we ask when something's gone sideways and we're trying to repair is, to both sides, what happened, to the person that, because all the stories are important. all the perceptions, all the perspectives are important. Um, what were you thinking and feeling at the time? What are you thinking and feeling now? So, to a person who's caused harm, that really allows for something that usually when we say, why did you do that? Why did you hit your brother? Why did you steal that? Why did you assault that person? Um, Often we don't know why. Often when we did that, we were not in the best part of our brain to be thinking about what we're doing. And we do it out of a fight, flight, freeze kind of reaction from the reptile part of our brain. And so when we ask, what were you thinking and feeling at the time? And then what were you thinking and feeling now? There's room for something that we usually don't, find when we talk to people about what went wrong. And that is remorse or perspective from now, perspective from the insightful part of our brain. And then to the person who's caused the harm, we say, how do you think? Who have you impacted and how? And what might you do to repair the harm? To the person who's been harmed after we ask the questions, what happened? What were you thinking and feeling at the time? What were you thinking and feeling now? It's like, what do you need to repair the harm? And who else around you has been harmed? Because quite often when we are harmed, then we harm other people actually in our reactions, or other people around us have been harmed because they are seeing us hurt, you know? So, so the other thing about that changed my perspective, just a second, I'm thinking about why I was talking about the questions is because the questions actually help us burn through the shame of being harmed or having harmed. And we can get to a point where um, we can think about repairing and do better. And the other thing that it's taught me, the other perspective it's changed is like when I went into high school administration, I could say that I had a pretty systemic mistrust of teenagers, right? Adolescents, like, and so it helped me get more curious about what they're doing, why they're doing it, or, from what's under what they're doing, but also realize that as humans, we really actually want to be in right relationship with each other. And when I say right, like nobody gets up in the morning and says, I'm gonna drive drunk and kill that person, or I'm gonna sell drugs and get caught, or whatever. So we want to be in right relationship, and that doesn't mean we have to be best friends or anything, but we want to be in right relationship so that we feel, um, yeah, that we can like, even if we've done harmed and like, how does it feel, as you said, when you get out or you get back to school and you haven't fixed the relationship at all? Like, how do you feel when you see each other at school or in the grocery store or whatever you might run into each other? um, Whereas when we can work restoratively, we can get back in right relationship, and that just might mean we agree not to even say hello to each other when we see each other, but we know what each other needs, or we're going to just acknowledge each other, but we're not going to become friends. We're not going to be in each other's lives anymore. Do you see what I mean by
Yeah,
right relationship?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
It's
need
not
each
just,
other, right? We don't want to be kicked out of the tribe. We need each other to survive.
yeah.
And whichever way, yeah. And so when humans do want to, and humans also, I find, a restorative way is to do things with them. So when you've messed up, we're not going to just send you out and then bring you back and hope things would change. We're going to sit down. We're going to talk about how that impacted everybody, what people need to repair, and we're going to support you in doing that. So we're going to do it with you as opposed to doing something to you, which is very punitive. You did that, you're gone for this long, right? And hope that you change, or we're going to do things for you. That's the kind of enabling, like, oh, I get it. Like this happened to you too. So therefore, you know, um, we want to actually like empower people and equip them to do better in our communities as opposed to, enable them or do things to them. So that's the width of restorative, is doing things with. So yeah, and in circle we are doing things with each. We are looking at what's going on with each other and not debating or convincing or arguing, you know?
Yeah. 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 With there's a lot of use of you hear the word alchemy quite a bit. At least I hear the word alchemy quite a bit. Looking into circles and any kind of experience which can be like surprisingly transformative. I remember asking, I think it was Elizabeth who I talked to, the first circle I did, like, where's the healing supposed to happen? Like she described the curriculum, like, this is waste. When do I get better? And she said, you know, she basically said, yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Come check it out. And what sticks with me is like it's an experience that we do together. The circle. It's not a like doctrines or teaching or like here's how you think about it. Here's the correct answer. It's something that you do. You go, even if it's on Zoom, it's an experience that we have together. And I wonder if you really got down to like what the alchemy of it is, like, how is it that I was such a radically different person on week 12 versus week one? And the
Mm.
dozens of angry emails I wrote to Elizabeth about how stupid the circle was and what a crackpot mess I'd ended up in. Should have known. Social worker from New York. You know what I mean? Like that. Um, I lean into my Oklahomaness, like Uh, but there it was. Where's the alchemy? I don't know. I put all the stuff in the bottle and then it was something different. There was lead and then there was gold. I don't know. But it's an experience. And this is what I'm blathering here, but I'm just gripped by the concept that there's something about the experience together with these other people,
Mhm.
that we have. Let me pitch it back over to you and see if I'm just talking hogwash to you, or see if you have any responses or thoughts about what is it in the circle? Where's the
Yeah.
magic?
Yeah. So for me, the magic is like in the healing circle realm, um, or a grieving circle or whatever. Um, the magic is that unlike when we usually talk to each other, relate to each other, we feel like I'm here and you're there and I need to bring you to my perspective. Or if you're sad or suffering or whatever, I have to fix you, right? I have to tell you what to do. Whereas in circle, the idea is we each get the time to speak. You don't have to agree with me. You just have to listen with an open mind and an open heart. And maybe something that I'm sharing in my experience is actually going to touch your heart, is actually going to influence you or not. Um, but there's none of this kind of persuade, get you to my side. We're not on sides, we're each in our own space and we're sharing to be known. And no one's going to interrupt me and no one's going to debate. Like, I know that I just have to share. I don't have to prove my point. I don't have to have the three arguments under my point. I don't have to talk down you for me to be right. I don't have to step on you for me to be higher. It's just that we are present with each other. We don't have to fix each other, but there's this beautiful space. Um, and for me, it's always so interesting that when I'm in circle and start talking about something or processing it, when I'm witnessed, I think there's something way more powerful than just doing it on my own. Like, why couldn't I work through that on my walk down the path? Like sometimes I do, but mostly there's this piece about being witnessed, that also is part of the magic. And when I do circles when we're working on harm having been done, and we're working through, you know, people talking about answering those questions, what happened, what they were thinking then and now, what they think the impact was, or what the impact actually was on them, right? What they need to repair the harm. It's amazing because somehow, like, I just always think, of course, I have pre-meetings with these folks beforehand to see if they're ready to, mostly the person who's caused the harm, are they being accountable? Are they not going to just show up and say, nah, I didn't do that? Like, that's just more harmful, right? But we plan the process, and as Mark Wedge, my teaching elder says, he says, just be clean with your circle, meaning plan your process, be ready, and leave room for the magic. Like leave room for God, leave room for whatever you want to, however you want to say it, leave room for spirit to come in. Because when we can speak one at a time and listen with an open heart and mind, we can really shift in even how we see ourselves and see each other. So, a lot of time when I'm doing a reparative circle, meaning dealing with harm, how we come in and everyone's so uncomfortable, and now I'm very comfortable with people being uncomfortable. And I think about, I always have to take myself back to that first healing circle I went to with Hidden Water and how I was feeling and just the body language and we get over this hump together where people have been, really authentic and been able to witness the harm and talk about the harm and then say what they need to repair and people can show up. And then there's just this almost beautiful opening. I mean, people are leaning in, they're making eye contact, they're smiling, they're feeling better about themselves. They're feeling better about this situation. So that's the alchemy that I witness as well. And it's not always rainbows and
No.
unicorns, not always. Um, and it's like the best way I know right now to do
Yeah.
things when it's an
Yeah.
appropriate response. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when, like you talked about, sometimes people come to the healing circle, and they're just not ready for it. And we, meaning we always, it's a choice. You're never ordered to circle. You're never forced into a restorative. It always has to be voluntary. And so it's always good that people have the agency around their self-care to say, yeah, no, this isn't for me right now.
I really feel like the way I see that now that, people bail out of circles and there's conflict in circles and all that, or it's just not the right time. I think let me, just let's look at what's happened. Failure wasn't the right time. Here's what we know happened. We don't always know exactly why the mushroom pops out of the ground that day and not some other day. It's a lot going on under the surface and we can't see it. That person who bailed in week 2 of the circle made a choice to go to the circle and they freaked out and they made a choice to bail, and that's part of their life. And now they know that a circle exists and that they went to it. And that experience just gets folded into their life. And we don't know what role that experience when they bailed out of a circle and wrote Elizabeth emails about how stupid it is and all that. We don't know what role that played in the fact that 7 years later, maybe something clicked in their mind and that circle had something to do with it. So my experience of that is just, well, whatever happens is what happened. They went there, they had this experience, and it'll play a role in their life, whatever it was.
What seed was planted by
Yeah.
that experience, even if we
Yeah.
don't see the mushroom pop or right?
It's not possible to do something in this cosmos without it having effects on the line. You cannot throw a stone into a pond without making ripples, and those ripples just do what they do, is kind of how it looks to me.
Yeah, and I'll say that there's been processes. When I talk about process, I talk about harmed and harmer and getting together and with supporters and a community member and sometimes we don't get face to face. Sometimes we don't go to process because someone's not ready or they're not accountable or whatever. Um, Number one, people always tell me uh, the pre-meeting helped anyway. The time I spent with them, it could be 1 hour, it could be 5 hours, it depends, several meetings. But people who have been harmed, just being witnessed, they said, just you listening to me and believing me and asking me what I need and me thinking about what I need, right? And even if the other person isn't ready to come to the process, they said like that really shifted things for me. Or I decided I'm not going to be upset. Like I'm not going to let my healing hinge on whether they come to this circle or not. I'm not going to give them that power, right? Or vice versa, the person who's harmed is so ready to repair and everything, but the other person's not ready. It 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 has already shifted something in them, even if we don't sit down and circle together. We don't go through that process. So very often we do, but I never see it as a failure if we don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm, So, you just can't it's so easy to ignore the basic facts right in front of your face. Like, even if the circle blows up after half an hour into the first one, it's still a fact that you've had those whatever 8 people that thought about it and decided, you know what? I want to make a positive contribution toward my actual life and my relationships with these people. There were 8 people that thought that and went to a certain time and place, and maybe they beat each other up with the talking sticks and ran on, and nothing ever happened again. Well, that's still for that moment they did that. I don't. I'm just repeating myself here, but yeah, continue on. I'm very interested in more about your experience over time, and like how your experience of your maybe that's a good question. How's your experience of yourself changed over time and yourself in relations with other people, if anything comes to mind on that, or anything about your relations with others, because that's a perpetual struggle with me.
Yeah. Well, it certainly changed my relationship with conflict. Um, I used to be conflict avoidant. I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want anybody to not like me. When I was a teacher and was told by a mentor, like, I think you'd be good as a vice principal at school, I was like, no way. Like, people are gonna hate me. I'm gonna need a thick skin for that. Like, um, and then but what has changed for me is my relationship to conflict, in that now I just see conflict. Even in my healing circle, if there's conflict, right? I think it's a good thing. I think it just means that something wants to change. And what we usually do is we like push that conflict down like a big beach ball in the water, and we try and hold it down, and by avoiding it, or it's like a wound that just festers more. And so, as I mentioned before, I've become very comfortable with discomfort of others, and therefore myself also.
Mhm.
Like, I have quite a strong mindfulness meditation practice. So, a formal practice where I meditate every morning, but also what I call the informal practice, which is just being present during the day, with what's going on around me, with what's going on inside me, and uh, just being able to be with discomfort more. Like right now, it's like this. Right now in my
Yeah.
healing circle, it's like this, right?
Yeah.
And that it's way more important if I'm upset by something, that I don't go and ask somebody else to fix it, that I bring it back to the circle, right? And that we
Yeah.
just speak our truths. And if somebody says, like, you said something that really offended me, that's much better that they say that and that we talk through it than for them to keep it, and I'm feeling that energy, or wondering what their story is or what my story is, or like, so for that's one thing, that's a huge thing. And that has been like a game changer in my life, just whether I have to please people or not please people, or if they're uncomfortable around me, or can we talk, that now I have tools with restorative language to say, instead of, uh, you said something that offended me, that I can say, when you said, I felt that, right? Or I feel this way when in circle, you tell me what a strong person I am. You tell me that I'm a hero or whatever. And I get to say how I feel about that, and not make them right or wrong, but just say, this is the impact on me. And this is my request, is that you don't say that about me, because this is the result. Um, so that's one thing is that I'm speaking my truth more. I feel more comfortable speaking my truth. And again, like restorative language is not like often we walk around and we say, even in the most banal situations as a parent, as a teacher, as a partner, like, clean up your stuff, put away your stuff, do the dishes. You never empty the dishwasher. You always interrupt me, right? Is a way to say things of how it's impacting me to the person so that it can land and possibly be heard. And after that, I'm like, well, at least I shared it with them. I'm not responsible for how they react to that or if that makes them mad or if they actually change or not. But it's the best way I know to actually communicate those things and to actually communicate them as opposed to letting them fester or letting them build up.
Yeah, right now it's like this. I love that you said that and that you talked about your comfort with conflict and your comfort with uncertainty around it. You know, my uh work life for the last 20 years has been really strange in a really strange corner of the world, absolutely chock full of vicious conflict by design, by design of the law. Because I worked in and around organized labor for 20 years. I've been on both sides. So if people that know a lot about organized labor can love me for the 10 years I spent as an elected guy on the union side, and they can loathe me for the 10 years I spent as a labor consultant who works for on the management side, and them that feel the other way can loathe me for the 10 years I spent on the union side and love me for the 10 years I spent like on the management side. But as a way of life, it's I couldn't imagine a more like you're going to become a humanist or you're going to become vicious and bitter because you're just around nonstop conflict and people labeling you and witnessing the freedom with which we human creatures, will treat people with contempt if we register them as different than us, if we come up with a different name for them. Bottomless contempt. And I'm subject to it constantly. Like, isn't this interesting? You don't know me from Adam. I know you don't know what you're talking about. All you know is that you can do anything you want to me in this moment. Isn't this interesting? Because of contempt, because you know, and I bring my green circleness and my like, well, I've been alienated since I was 4 years old. Y'all got nothing to hurt me with. You know what I mean? And I've got my own healing and my own, but that stance toward like my fellow human creatures, it's just the conflict. That's what registered with me when you said it's just the this or that, apples, oranges. It's like a Dr. Seuss book. The Herks and the Snurks, the who cares? Put a pom pom on top of your beanie. I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. And you can witness that. Like it's just this. You're choosing this, you're living in this, you're wallowing in this. It's this. It's this conflict. Do you like it? That really came up for me when I heard you talk about that. It really sounded familiar.
Mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's no question in there for you, but
No, no. It just made me think of sometimes in my relationships with others and what's going on. I don't know for sure, and I make up stories
yeah,
when I don't know for sure,
yeah,
when I'm not leaning in to communicating with them and finding out, and so I make up stuff, and usually I make up really negative stuff,
yeah.
right? And so sometimes I really have to ask myself, like, who am I with this story, and who am I without that story, and which one? Because I don't
Yeah.
know for sure. I don't know
Yeah.
for sure if they really think that about me. I don't know. Do you know? Or
Yeah.
yeah.
I, I practice Zen. And I got a teacher, and at some point it can be very life altering to absorb, to act. What would it be like if I actually fully lived a life based on the awareness of the fact that I do not know what these things mean. I know that I do not know what I know what this event means to me. And
Right.
that's because I'm bringing my entire life to this event right now. What does that mean for you? I don't know. I do not know. So that that's in my mind. If you really can believe that, like I really do not know. I really do not know if that's good or bad because I do not know. I don't know what horrendous luck my bad luck saved me from, and I don't know what amazing luck my good luck blocked off. I do not know. Up to and
right?
including the fact that I'm a green circle child sex abuse survivor living with borderline personality disorder and, BPD, and I'm a, recovering addict and bulimic. And I'm also, talking to you right now. And it's this day in the cosmos and it's a beautiful day and I'm right here. And that's all there is. There's not other things. There's just right now.
Right.
And there's nothing you could give me that would make me trade right now for anything else. And I can anyway. Mm, Here we are, you
Here
know,
we are.
here we
Yeah.
are, you know. And if you want to wallow in this conflict in the future, is one of two. I don't mean you, I mean cosmically, kind of generally as we function as human beings, as I see it. I mean, if you want to act naturally, and you just do what comes natural, then eventually down the line, there's only going to be one group left because one of the groups will wipe out the other one. Or if it's a stalemate, you'll all be in a truth and reconciliation committee when you decide that peace ain't so bad after you've lost everything you ever dreamed about having. And you've plumbed the depths of loss and sadness and grief and wishing that you'd never laid eyes on any of this stuff. Then you'll come to the table. And I think
Yeah.
for us green circle people, I'm at the table. I came to the table. Truth and reconciliation me up. Sign me up for your stupid restorative justice thing, and I'll go sit and it's that I'm there. I'm in. I'm out. You
One
know.
thing that came up from you while you were saying that, and we're talking about like what we know or don't know, or the stories we make up, is very, very often when I talk to people before we circle up together when we're trying to repair a harm. Um, and I'm deep in it. Like I told you, I came to Hidden Water to heal my stories so that I could work with what we call complex and sensitive cases. So that means we are circling up sometimes on sexual harm, on intimate partner violence, on survivors of homicide. You have killed my son, and now you're out of incarceration, and we are in the same community together, and we are circling up to talk about this and heal this, right? And very often people say, well, those other folks aren't going to come to the circle. Like, there's no way they're going to sit down and talk about this. But how often are both sides saying that? How often
Yeah.
are both sides like, yeah, making up stuff about the other side? And when we sit in circle, it allows us to see people with different eyes, I find, when we're sharing to be known. We don't have to fix anybody. We're just listening to understand. And I don't play a game, but I love this piece where um, in Healing Circle, I notice my judgments the first week because we say, be more curious than judgmental. But the truth is, our brains are made to discern. Our brains are made like judgment is a survival skill, right? But we can either get into them and believe them and spiral down into them, or we can just notice them. Huh. So I notice my judgments on week 1, and then I check in with them on week 12. It's so fascinating. Like, it's so fascinating what my first impression was and how I think sometimes, like, oh man, this person and I are just going to grate on each other the whole time. And I've fallen in love with them by the end. Like, there's always a
Yeah.
part of every person in my circle that I've fallen in love with by the end.
Yeah. 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 This is I relate to this 100%. A lot of my where I'm at in my life right now is about what I notice is about like exactly what you're talking about, the judgments, the like I can be extremely irascible and all these things. And I wish I, no, I don't say it. I don't wish I could say this. What I can say is I have those judgments on 5 minutes into week one, 10 minutes into week one, 37 minutes into week seven, 42 minutes into week two, 97 minutes into week 12. But I have the same, it's about the, what's my stance toward my judgment and my irritation and what's my stance toward that? I know what it's like to live 40 years a slave, to a BPD psyche, with a really chaotic attachment mechanism and feeling like love and betrayal are the synonyms, the same thing. And I can see in my relations with my circle keepers how those I trapped myself. Those people didn't trap me with their affection and then betray me and hurt me. Those were just people who tried to love me, and look at the price I made them pay. Because as soon as they did something I don't like, I experience it viscerally in my body, my guts as a betrayal, you
Mm,
know, as like finding the wrong underwear in your partner's suitcase. It's how it
mhm,
feels. And nothing happened. But
mm,
experience on the scales have come off. I see the truth, Mm, 'cause that was my experience of love as a child.
mm,
When so that's my relationship with that is I do not know if you could put my head in some kind of like fMRI machine or something. I don't even know if the what people might say negative, like the bad stuff. I don't use that language, but I don't even know if the kind of static would even be that much less now than it was 5 or 6 years ago. But my
mm,
relationship with it is
mm.
utterly different. It's just there. It's okay. I'll feel different in a minute. There's no reason I should feel different. Why would I feel different? I know what my childhood was like. Why would I have an easy time with romantic relationships? Why? Why would that come about? How would I get that? I'm okay. Like I am, you know?
Yeah. And so when you said like my relationship to it, um, it reminds me of how I used to talk about my judgment, my fear, my sorrow, and when I'm practicing now with mindfulness, I am noting more just like, huh, look at that judgment. I just name it judgment. Huh, look at that fear rising, not mine, right? Because everything's impermanent anyway. And like when I make it mine, then it's a part of me that if I let go of it, it's a pound of flesh. But just like noting it as judgment, blame, fear, sorrow, joy, all
Yeah.
of it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I notice when I look at the world that the kind of society that we live in this moment. I have these various hopes, which in my relationship with hopes isn't that nice? Now I know how I would like things to be, but things are going to proceed however they proceed, and I'll just see how it turns out. But I notice that I have these hopes that we kind of do something to kind of change how we relate to each other in a society before we all end up at a truth and reconciliation committee meetings in 5 years. You know, uh, and I don't know if you've ever seen this great Errol Morris documentary called The Fog of War about Robert McNamara and the Vietnam War. And McNamara became a very reflective guy toward the end of his life. And the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let me tell you this brief anecdote, and then you brought all this up in me. The Cuban Missile Crisis was happening in whatever year that was, in the 61, 62, and we're the United States and the Soviet Union were really very close to things getting out of hand over nothing, over their missiles in Cuba, and we kind of got in this face off about it. And things were kind of as they do, fights are easier to start than they are to stop. And things were rapidly kind of getting out of hand to the extent that people were staying up all night in the White House worried about nuclear war that night, and telegrams going back and forth and phone calls. And there were eventually a telegram that Nikita Khrushchev sent. He was the premier of the Soviet Union. He sent this to President Kennedy. And there are the two leaders. They couldn't figure out how to get out of it. And this is like happening now. When we can wake up in the morning, we don't know. And Khrushchev said, Mr. President, our countries are on the brink of war. And he said, you and I know our country is at the brink of war. We're pulling the knot tighter. We're pulling on the ends of the knot of war. And he said, you and I know how wars end because they had both gone through World War II. No joke, no laughing matter in the Soviet Union. He said, you and I know how wars end. Wars end when tanks roll through towns. He knew the devastation. And he
Yeah.
said, if it's up to us to make it not go there, you and I know this. These others don't. These people spoiling for war, they don't know that on down the line, you know, they give their left arm to never have had any of this ever come up.
Yeah.
Go back and watch cartoons. I mean, forget it. And so I feel that in my life as a human being, it's up to me to not live in a state of war. And I know what it's like to live in a state of war with myself for decades.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that's under my control is whether I address the world in a stance of war or a stance of peace. And if I address the world and my fellow human creatures from a stance of peace, voila, I live in a peaceful world, you know?
Yeah,
And I know that because I work in a high conflict environment. I'm in a high conflict environment. I'm at peace. I'm at peace with the people that I'm around,
yeah,
even those ones that are, flinging contempt at me. They're my fellow
yeah,
human creatures and they think I'm something I'm not. I am a human being, and if I show them that, I'm meaner and more ornery than your average person. And I know that if I show them enough humanity, they're going to wear out. They're
yeah,
eventually going to wear out.
yeah.
That's a
And
lot, but I'll shut up.
no, I just mean it makes me think about when I'm making a decision. I mean, the restorative lens is, am I making this decision from a place of love, or am I making it from a place of fear? That's usually my litmus test, right? Like, I'm not going to talk to this person ever again, or whatever. Or I should, this is really getting in the way of our relationship. I should maybe see if they're open to talking to me about it, right? And that's
Yeah.
all the ways that we look at how to set up those hard conversations, how have those hard conversations, what involves many people are impacted by it, how to circle up and have those conversations. And when you set up the circle, like we do in Hidden Water, where one person speaks at a time, we don't give advice, we don't you know, we just speak from our own experience. And that usually has some impact not only on us, but then also on other people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when we can say, it's okay to say when your dog is barking all day, this is the impact it has on me, right? Are you willing to work with me to do something about that? Is And if they don't, it's like you said, if they're not willing, at least I tried. At least I reached out, through peace, through love, as opposed to, I'm calling bylaw and getting them to pick up that dog. And
Yeah.
that's out of fear and anger.
Yeah. Yeah. And whether and what's my stance toward this person I'm talking to? If I regard them as it's my job to try to get this person to go to the circle. It's my job to try to get this person to develop a willingness to make amends. Now I'm approaching that person as a target. And I'm trying to say, what do I have to say to this person to get him to do what I want? Because I've decided, for reasons unclear to me, that what I want is no. I'm a human being. That's all it takes. What I want is what, you know, we need no further justification. I want. That's end of the rest of his
Yeah.
words. I want, you know.
Yeah. So it's really focusing on intention versus
Yeah.
expectation, right?
Yeah.
My intention is to invite you into this conversation about your dog. You don't want to have it. Okay. So I'm not even going to be disappointed because as soon as my intention, which is to invite you in, has been reached, or even when I'm doing a training or having this conversation, my
Yeah.
intention is to share with you how restorative practice has impacted my life in a positive way. I've already won. Whether you take it and run with it or go, I don't believe that, right?
Well, because if the person doesn't care and they never do anything about it and they throw a rock at you, you haven't lost anything because the time wasn't right for that person to go there anyway. There wasn't going to be a circle with that person. That wasn't
And
a thing. That mushroom not anywhere near ready. So
right.
you didn't miss
But
nothing.
I'm in integrity with myself
Yeah.
because I stood in my truth because yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
and you display that to that person, and then that person has had an experience of being addressed as a human creature by another human creature who is willing to take them, to treat them with the respect of I'm offering this invitation. You
yeah,
know, that's what I got.
yeah,
And as for the rest of it, I don't know. I don't even know what to hope for. See previous discussion. I don't know what the good. I don't know what's. It's very hard to tell. It's very hard to even know what to hope for because you don't know if you got what you wanted, would you like it if after you got it? If you had a magic wand and could arrange society, you would probably find out that your magic wand and your arrangement of society did not, you did, there are a lot of things you didn't take into account.
Exactly.
and a lot of things you don't know. And
Right.
you invented a new way to have for human beings to engage in semi-eternal human behavior. You know, there's no point. That's just me blathering. I'm very sorry, Christine. Sorry.
No worries.
Um, any last things on your mind? Any burning topics that are coming up for you? It's been a
No,
great
I feel like
conversation.
we've done a good round of what are restorative practices in my life, how they've been a game changer not only personally, because I feel like when I communicate restoratively, when I approach conflict in a restorative way, when I circle up, um, because we do it as a family, and not only when there's wrongdoing, but when it's time to shower someone with appreciation, when we're celebrating something, when you know, we can do that in our families, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, both to celebrate, but also to grieve, to talk about hard things. And when I do that, both professionally and personally, um, it's had a huge impact on my life, and I think a ripple effect on those around. Yeah.
For sure. Well, just by way of parting, I mean, my kind of, the one of the core bits of audience that I really have in mind are people who are aware, child sex abuse survivors, war zone kids who have become aware that healing or that they got to do something. Their
Mm.
Jenga towers falling down. They've kind of or they face facts, but like what now? That's where a lot of healing memoirs and things they kind of end with like I realize what happens, but then you and I both know that healing, to get back to where to restore yourself to yourself, you can't really put a timeline on it. You got to get down that road, but those are my, I want those people to know that healing is possible. And, it's a core belief in Hidden Water that without any type of regard to how radically, cinematically horrible the things are that may have happened to a person, without any kind of regard to what kind of damage it was or how long, or whether or not you can tie your shoes without assistance, which I've had to struggle with, without any regard for that, you can be restored to yourself and you can learn to become what you are and healing is possible without any regard for that. Is there anything on your mind that you would say to people that are kind of in that position in their life where they know things are a wreck, but don't know
Yeah.
what to do about it?
I mean, I loved when you were talking about your first circle and the messages you were sending to Elizabeth, and I see that in my circles very often. Like this is going to take 12 weeks. Oh my God. Or we're going to set, for 3 weeks, we're going to get to know each other and create the container and see what we need from each other. Like, come on, let's go, right? And I would just say back to intention versus expectation. Um, with respect to hidden water healing circles, like if you have an intention to walk a healing path for yourself, regardless of anybody else's role with respect to that harm. If you have that for yourself and just step into the process without the expectation, just honor your intention. I want a better life for myself. I want to do better for myself. I want, a little more ease in my life. That just stepping into it is the beginning of the alchemy, is the beginning of the shift of the change. And it's almost like it took me to be in conflict with myself to know that something needed to change. It took me, to be able to say, ah, I don't like that I keep dreaming of this. I don't like that this is always present, that I'm triggered by this or that. And sh it wasn't the first 12 weeks that everything just went away and I was completely healed, but shift happened. And now I'm in a place with those stories where they are not a stain on the quilt of my life anymore. Like they are a part of my quilt. And they have allowed me to make living amends and do things that are positive in other people's lives because of it.
That's beautiful. Let's end on that. Thank
Let's
you.
end on that.
Thank you so much, Christine. And hope you all enjoy seeing this. And let me take a look out the window. It's a beautiful day on the trail to the Western Lands. Let's get a move on, Pilgrim.